We are 5 days away from the start of Monday Night Football. Hall of Famer Troy Aikman, along with Joe Buck, will be on the call. It's the Bills and the Jets. The season, Troy, obviously kicks off tomorrow night. Chiefs and Lions, and obviously for Kansas City, Patrick Mahomes, the most important player. But if I'm listing the next two most important, I'm saying it's Chris Jones and Travis Kelce. One's holding out, the other's injured. If neither go, right, they don't sort out Jones tomorrow, and you don't have those guys, how much can reasonably be put on Patrick Mahomes' plate and assume you're just not going to miss a beat?
Well, I think that's been a question for him for many years, and he's answered those questions. I think
Yep.
when you've looked at his career and without some of the key players, he's been able to find a way to win. I think it's a credit to him. It's a credit to Andy Reid and that staff and what they've been able to do. But those are two great players, and you start losing players like that, then eventually it has a big impact. I know that if I was over on the other side, I'd sure be happy about it, especially if I was Jared Goff, knowing that Chris Jones isn't going to be rushing. I mean, that changes a lot of things as far as what you're doing within pass protection, and then of course not to have his number one weapon in Travis Kelce. So a lot of favorable things for Detroit, but it's still going to be a monumental task for them to go on the road, defending Super Bowl champs, playing on the road like that. I always feel like the Super Bowl champ comes into week one still riding that high off of the Super Bowl, and they're hard to beat that first week of the season.
Yeah, Detroit's trying to take a step forward. I'm interested, Troy, in a team who's taken steps forward but kind of hit a ceiling, and that's the Buffalo Bills. A few years ago, they go to Kansas City, play that memorable postseason game. They changed the overtime rules as a result of it, right? But then they lose the next year in the very same round, but at home against Cincinnati. And Troy, if they have a similar type of year, right? I think people will look at them and go, hey, they're a fun team, they're a good team, but this is just what they are. They're good, they're not great. What has to happen to take this step forward they're trying to take?
Well, I think you bring up a good point, Scott, because the loss 2 years ago to Kansas City, with 13 seconds left in that game, the feel going into that offseason was entirely different than the one that they just experienced because they got it handed to them in that loss against Cincinnati. And so they had to live with that this entire offseason. That's why I think our game week one against the Jets is going to be big for a lot of reasons, but especially to see how Buffalo bounces back from that. But I think one of the real keys for Buffalo is the fact well, let's just look at last year. They overcame a lot. In a lot of ways, they were snake bitten in what happened to them. But yet they got themselves to the position that they needed to in the postseason. They just fell flat. Now, come back this year. They do have a healthy Josh Allen. I think the key is how can they support him? He essentially has had to carry that team because they just not run the ball very well without him. He makes up for a lot of mistakes up front within the offensive line, but it's a long year to get back to January again and then give yourself a shot where they fell short the last 2 years.
You bring up a great point about week one. That Bills-Jets game is so big for so many reasons. And as you look at the slate, we know so little now, Troy, right? The preseason is just a joke.
Right.
Half the people don't even play. And so you enter the year with the legitimate questions where you just don't know. And I'm interested from your perspective, whether it's a player or a team, we don't get the total picture week one, but we start to figure some stuff out. What are you looking at and going, I want to know about this guy or this team?
Well, there's a lot of storylines coming into the year as there is every year. You're right. I think the mystery, and I know this as a player, when you go into week one, you have to be ready to adjust more so in week one than you do any other week because you start to get an identity as a team and you don't stray too far from that. But a lot of teams holding it close to the vest in the preseason didn't play a lot of players. This is typical. And then you go into week one, you say, wow, what is this exactly going to look like? And so there's a lot of surprises that come with that. I think the Jets, of course, are a great storyline. I do think they're going to be really good, but there is going to come a time when the honeymoon's going to end. And how do
Especially
they
in New
deal with
York.
that? And
Yeah.
well, that's right. And I think the one thing about it is that Aaron Rodgers he's been in this situation his entire career. That the expectation for him is to win a Super Bowl, and it was throughout his time there in Green Bay. This is new territory for the New York Jets. The rest of those players, they haven't even made the postseason, and yet now they're being mentioned as a contender for the Super Bowl. So I'm not worried about Aaron Rodgers, but how does the rest of the team handle that with the expectations and the spotlight when things don't go well? And there's going to be a point in this game on Monday night against the Bills where they will struggle. And how do they deal with that? And that's the key for every team that ultimately is able to go on and do great things.
Long wait's over. Chiefs and Lions on Thursday night, and the best game of the weekend happens to be ours. Troy, I look forward to seeing you on Monday at MetLife and throughout the year on Monday night to chat with you and Joe in person. Be well.
Same here. Thank you, Scott.
Thanks for watching ESPN on YouTube. For live streaming sports and premium content, subscribe to ESPN+.